Before I tell you what I lived through, let me pull you into a world where power is measured in echoes under marble vaults, where a single sentence can move an army, and where the fate of millions turns on what happens in one crowded room. Imagine Rome not as a postcard of ruins, but as a living organism. Smoke rising from bakeries at dawn, the Tiber carrying barges of grain from Ostia, the Forum swelling with petitioners and peddlers, soldiers on leave, philosophers, debt collectors, and spies. If you walk with me, you will see Rome from the inside, its politics and its streets, its temples and its alleyways, the calm of provincial coastlines, and the terror of battlefields where dust and blood erase the difference between noble and commoner. You will hear the Senate's ritual language, and you will hear the raw language of men who are hungry, afraid, and armed. And you will understand something unsettling. Rome does not conquer only with swords. It conquers with roads, laws, coins, oaths, and the quiet machinery of administration. So let me speak to you like a friend who has seen too much and is finally ready to tell the truth. When I say I, imagine a Roman senator at the end of the Republic. When I say you, imagine you are walking at my side, looking through my eyes. Ready? Then come with me, back to the years when the old rules still pretended to hold and everyone could feel them breaking. Before we begin the first chapter, if you want more documentary-style stories like this, subscribe to the channel and like this video. It helps me bring you the next part, and it tells YouTube to share this with people who love history as much as you do. Chapter 1. Marble, Dust, and the Sound of Names. You think you know Rome until you try to move through it before sunrise. The city is still dark, but it is already awake. From the Suburra, the first smoke rises. Oil lamps, charcoal braziers, bread ovens being stoked. I leave my house on the Caelian hill, wrapped in a wool cloak, and you would walk beside me, careful where you place your feet. The streets are narrow. Night soil is dumped from upper windows. Dogs pick at scraps. The only light comes from doorways and a few torches. By the time we reach the Forum, the sky is turning the color of old bronze. The Basilica Aemilia looms like a cliff of columns. Moneylenders open their tables, clicking seals into wax and counting coins. The rostra is still empty, but it will not stay that way. Behind it, the Capitoline rises steep and sacred, crowned by the temple of Jupiter, Optimus Maximus. Rome's geography is not gentle. It is 7 hills stitched together by valleys that flood when the Tiber swells. The river is lifeline and hazard. It brings grain and marble on barges, and it also brings sickness when the banks turn to swamp in summer heat. If you stand where I stand, you can feel the city's layers. Under the paving stones runs the Cloaca Maxima, the great sewer, older than any living senator. Overhead, aqueduct water sings through lead pipes to fountains and private houses, and everywhere the sound of names, clients calling on patrons, petitioners calling on magistrates, advocates calling on juries. Rome is noisy because Rome is always negotiating. You ask me how a man becomes a senator. The honest answer is slowly and never alone. Birth opens the first door, but patronage pushes you through it. I began as a young quester, counting supplies, keeping accounts, learning the names of men who mattered. Names are Rome's true currency. When you speak them in the right order, ancestor, tribe, office held, you can make a crowd respect you before you've said anything wise. My first real lesson in power came not in the Senate House, but on the road. The Via Appia runs like a stone spear south toward Capua and Brundisium. Each milestone is measured, each bridge engineered, each way station stocked. A legion on the Appia can move as if distance is an inconvenience. Roads are not just stone. They are policy made physical. As questor, I was posted to Hispania Ulterior, further Spain, a name that sounds tidy until you see it. In Spain, the Republic is not marble. It is dust, olive groves, and glare-off white stone. The Baetis River, broad, slow, and brown, carries cargo inland the way the Tiber does at home. Silver comes from mines where men work in darkness until their lungs fail. Wheat grows in plains that look endless until you realize every field has a boundary marked by an old quarrel. The locals speak Latin when it protects them in court, and they refuse it when pride is stronger than fear. And our soldiers, stationed in forts that smell of sweat and wood smoke, learn the province the way a man learns a scar, by living with it. When I returned to the city, I believed in the Republic the way a man believes in a building that has sheltered him since childhood. The Senate met in the Curia, wooden benches, white togas, the smell of sweat, trapped under a high roof. It was not a grand hall like people imagine. It was a working chamber, and its rituals were meant to turn ambition into procedure. The presiding consul opens with prayers and formalities. A senior man speaks first. Others follow, ranked by office, as if order itself could prevent chaos. Outside the Curia, elections stirred the Campus Martius like a storm. Candidates in gleaming togas, whitened with chalk, walked among citizens, shaking hands, asking for support as if modesty still mattered. But behind them were paid supporters, and behind those supporters were clubs and knives. I watched rival factions fight near the voting enclosures until the ground was slick with rainwater and blood. I remember thinking, we are becoming a city that votes with fear. In those years, the Republic still told itself it was eternal. In the Senate, we argued about provinces and taxes as if words could contain the world, but the world was expanding faster than our traditions. News came from the north. Gaul, a land of forests, rivers, and tribes that did not live in cities the way we did. Julius Caesar was there with his legions, sending dispatches that made conquest sound like destiny. Every messenger brought a new map into my mind. The Rhine like a cold boundary, the Alps like a jagged wall, the Atlantic Ocean like the edge of the known world. You would have noticed the change in Rome before any civil war began. The streets filled with veterans looking for land. Grain distributions became politics by another name. If the people were hungry, they listened to any man who promised bread. In the Senate, old families spoke of virtue and precedent, but they also hired gangs. On certain days, you could not cross the forum without seeing men with clubs wrapped in cloaks, waiting for a signal. I remember one meeting. This is where the Republic starts to crack. A senator read a proposal meant to curb the power of generals in the provinces. The words were proper, almost pious, but the room's temperature changed. We all understood that laws were now aimed at individuals, and individuals had legions. When the vote was called, the ayes sounded timid. The noes sounded like a challenge. That evening, I walked to the Tiber and watched barges moving toward Ostia, their lanterns trembling on the water. From Ostia, ships would cross to Africa and Egypt. Rome depends on those routes. Without African grain, the city starves. Without Spanish silver, the treasury empties. Without Eastern taxes, the games go silent and the people turn dangerous. And that is what I want you to feel before the swords come out. Rome is not just a city. It is a network. Roads, ports, laws, legions, and promises. When one ambitious man learns how to pull every thread at once, the republic becomes a stage, and we, senators, citizens, even generals, become actors who cannot leave the play. Chapter 2, the Rubicon line. If Chapter 1 was the Republic. Creaking, this is the moment the timber snaps. You have heard the phrase, crossing the Rubicon, but I want you to feel what it meant to those of us inside Rome. The Rubicon is not a great river in winter. It is a cold, fast boundary in northern Italy, and in summer, it can look like nothing more than a ditch with reeds. Yet it marked a legal line. A commander could hold imperium military authority in his province. But he was not supposed to bring an army into Italy itself, because the city and Italy were supposed to be protected from military coercion. The warning arrived like a fever. Caesar, returning from Gaul, demanded to keep his command and stand for office. The Senate, led by men who feared what he had become, demanded he lay down his arms. We argued about constitution and precedent, but the real issue was simple. If he disbanded, he could be prosecuted. If he did not, he would be a rebel. You could see the trap closing even as speeches pretended it was open debate. When the messenger ran into the forum, mud on his sandals, breath steaming in the winter air, people did not ask for the full report. They asked one question: has he crossed? By nightfall we knew. Caesar had taken a single legion and stepped over that small river as if stepping over centuries of law. The city changed in hours. Senators sent their families out of town. Wealth moved into chests. Gold disappeared. The streets filled with rumors that Caesar's cavalry was already at the gates, that Pompey had a secret army waiting, that the gods had sent omens, that the streets would run red. Pompey the Great, the man the Senate trusted to stop Caesar, was in Rome, and I stood close enough to see the strain in his face. Pompey had conquered the East. He had cleared pirates from the sea. He was used to giving orders on open ground, not fighting a war that began with panic. And here is the hard truth, and you should remember it. Rome did not have an army inside the city. The legions were out there, on frontiers and in provinces. Politics assumed distance. Caesar destroyed that assumption. So we fled, not in a dignified procession, but in a long, embarrassed stream. You would have watched men who preached steadiness now hurrying down the Via Appia with their luggage on mules. We went south toward Brundisium on the Adriatic, because from there we could cross to Greece and gather forces. The road was packed. Refugees, slaves, senators, scribes, priests carrying sacred objects. Winter rain turned fields into mud. Campfires smoked. At night, we heard wolves. Brundisium is a natural harbor, a hook-shaped bay protected from rough seas. In better times, it is loud with merchants and sailors. Now it was loud with orders. Pompey tried to organize a withdrawal across the Adriatic before Caesar could trap us. You would have seen the logistics that textbooks ignore: counting ships, rationing space, arguments over which units could cross first. Horses do not like ships. Grain, sacks split. Sea wind makes men vomit. War is not only bravery, it is scheduling. We crossed to Dyrrhachium on the Illyrian coast, a place of steep hills and hard rock. The Adriatic here can be calm as polished metal or vicious with sudden storms. From Dyrrhachium, roads run inland toward Macedonia and Thessaly. This is where you begin to understand geography as strategy. Mountains channel armies the way walls channel crowds. Narrow passes decide where a battle can even happen. Rivers decide whether an army can eat. Caesar moved fast, living off speed and daring. Pompey moved like a man who wanted time. At Dyrrhachium, I saw trench warfare long before anyone would give it that name. Lines of earthworks, sharpened stakes, watchtowers, constant patrols. Caesar tried to encircle Pompey. Pompey tried to break out. Skirmishes flared at dusk. Men died not only from swords, but from dysentery, from infected wounds, from fatigue. When you are close enough, you learn that battle is often an accumulation of ugly minutes. Pompey won a sharp engagement there, and for one brief moment some senators celebrated as if the war was finished. But victory without decision is a dangerous illusion. Caesar withdrew inland toward Thessaly, toward a wide plain where cavalry could run and where both armies could finally meet without cliffs and trenches forcing their hands. Pharsalus. Say the name slowly because it still tastes of dust in my mouth. Thessaly is a land of open fields bordered by mountains, and in summer the air shimmers with heat. When we reached the plain, I climbed a low rise to look down. On one side, Pompey's army, many legions, deep ranks, cavalry on the wing, allied contingents speaking different languages. On the other, Caesar's, fewer men, but veterans from Gaul who moved like a single creature. Between them, space that seemed too small to hold so much fate. I was not a soldier, but a senator, cannot escape war when the state breaks. I stood with other civilians behind Pompey's lines, trying to look like observers rather than hostages of fortune. You would have heard the sounds first, the low murmur of thousands waiting, the clink of armor, the creak of leather straps, the shouted commands that turned fear into motion, then the trumpets, then the advance. What the poets leave out is the crush. Two lines collide and the world becomes a press of bodies. Men cannot swing swords freely. They stab into gaps. They push with shields. They scream. Dust rises until the sun looks dim. The dead become obstacles that the living trip over. In the center, the lines heave back and forth like a sea. On Pompey's left wing, his cavalry tried to sweep Caesar's smaller horsemen aside. That was the plan. Break the wing, roll the line, win. But Caesar had prepared a hidden reserve of infantry, men trained to strike upward into faces and unarmored points. When Pompey's cavalry surged forward, they met not panic, but a wall of spears and ruthless discipline. Horses turned, riders fell. Suddenly, Pompey's advantage became confusion. Caesar's men pressed, and the flank began to fold. I watched the moment morale broke. It is not dramatic like a single hero falling. It is a collective decision made in thousands of minds at once that the line will not hold. You see men glance backward. You see officers shouting and being ignored. You see the space between units widen like cracks in ice. Then the retreat becomes a rout. Pompey left the field, not in triumph, not even in organized withdrawal, but in a silence that felt like shame. That night, as we fled again, I understood something I had refused to admit. The Republic's legitimacy was not a set of laws. It was the shared belief that no one man could own the state. At Pharsalus, belief died, and the dust covered it. Chapter 3. The Dagger and the Empty Chair. After Pharsalus, the world did not feel new. It felt rearranged, like furniture moved in a house you thought you knew. We returned to Rome under Caesar's shadow, and I want you to imagine that shadow not as darkness, but as inevitability. The Senate still met. We still wore our togas. We still spoke in the old formulas. But when Caesar entered, Conversation changed the way air changes before a storm. You ask what Caesar did with power once he had it. The Republic does not die only from violence. It dies from administration that makes people forget they need the old rules. Caesar stabilized debts so the credit system would not shatter. He revised the calendar so the year would match the sun instead of drifting. He planned colonies to settle veterans and reduce the pressure of unemployed men in Rome. He added men to the Senate, appointed magistrates, and pushed laws through with a speed that felt like a year of politics compressed into a single afternoon, until you realized the Senate's role was becoming decorative. In the provinces, many people welcomed that efficiency. They wanted predictable taxes and protection from corrupt governors. In the city, many citizens wanted grain, games, and peace more than procedure. Caesar offered all three, and the price was that Rome began to imagine itself governed by a single will. I traveled with a commission to survey land for veterans in Campania. It sounds dry. Stand with me on those fields, and you will understand why it could ignite riots. A veteran points to a plot and says it was promised for blood spilled in Gaul. A farmer points to the same plot and says his father planted olives there. Both men have calloused hands. When we measured boundaries with ropes and stakes, we were not measuring soil. We were measuring whose suffering counted. Caesar's wars pulled him across the map. Spain in the west still smoldered with resistance. The east was a mosaic of harbors and islands, Rhodes, Crete, Cyprus, where sea lanes are wealth. Egypt was different, a land organized by the Nile's flooding, where the river is a calendar and a god. I went to Alexandria on a diplomatic mission after Caesar's intervention there. Alexandria is not Rome. Rome is crowded hills and old stone. Alexandria is planned and airy, with long, straight streets that catch sea wind and markets where you hear a dozen languages in a single breath. In Alexandria, I stood on the harbor mole and looked up at the Pharos lighthouse. Its fire marked safe water for merchantmen the way Rome's roads mark safe land. Down below, scribes tallied cargo, grain, flax, glass, and papyrus. You begin to see how the empire breathes. Grain flows north, silver flows east, and soldiers flow wherever a general points. Back in Rome, honors piled on Caesar like offerings. Statues, titles, special seats, special clothing. This matters because Romans are trained to hate kings. Our oldest stories are about driving them out. Every new honor made some part of the city flinch. You could see it in meetings, men watching each other, counting allies, weighing silence. Now I want you with me on the Ides of March. It did not begin like a tragedy. It began like a normal Senate day. Petitions, whispers, the shuffle of sandals. We met in the theater of Pompey because the Curia was under repair. That irony still cuts. Caesar was killed in a place named for the man he defeated. I took my seat and watched Caesar enter. He looked tired, not weak, tired, as if decisions had begun to press on his bones. Around him gathered men I had dined with, men whose sons I had helped, men who had praised Caesar in public and cursed him in private. Conspiracy does not always look like strangers. Sometimes it looks like familiarity. When the first knife flashed, my mind refused it. Then the sound arrived, steel into flesh, benches scraping, shouts that turned into screams. Senators surged toward the exits like a crowd at a fire. I remember the smell, iron, sweat, crushed laurel. I remember Caesar pulling his toga over his head as if modesty could protect him. I remember the darkening pool on the floor. When it ended, there was a silence that did not feel like relief. It felt like an empty chair at a banquet, a missing voice that everyone still expects to hear. The conspirators cried, "Liberty!" But liberty is not a spell. You cannot say it and make order appear. Outside, Rome did not become a restored republic. It became uncertainty. Veterans did not know whether their grants would stand. Creditors did not know whether contracts would be honored. The city ran on expectations, and expectations had just been stabbed to death. Then came the funeral and the speeches. Mark Antony displayed Caesar's bloodied garments and read out promises to the people. Grief became fury. Fires started. Homes of conspirators were attacked. The Senate issued decrees, tried compromises, spoke of legality. Meanwhile, the real currency of power, loyal soldiers, moved toward whoever could pay and promise. And that is how Octavian appears. Young, careful, carrying Caesar's name like a weapon wrapped in silk. I watched him in the Senate, letting older men underestimate him. He formed alliances, broke them, formed them again. The Republic's offices became tools in hands that no longer believed in the Republic. War shifted east over the Adriatic to Macedonia. Brutus and Cassius raised forces there, and the final clash came at Philippi, on rolling ground bordered by marsh and woods. Reports arrived like bruises. 2 battles, thick dust, men fighting at close quarters until units dissolved into desperate knots. When Brutus fell, the last clean story of saving the Republic died with him. After that, it was not ideology. It was succession. Who would inherit Caesar's power? Who would control the legions, the provinces, the sea routes? In the Senate House, we still spoke in the language of tradition. But tradition had become a costume worn over armor. Chapter 4. Actium and the Shape of Peace. By the time Octavian and Antony divided the world between them, you could feel Rome's exhaustion. The city had lived through conscriptions, confiscations, and lists of enemies posted like public shopping notices, names to be hunted, properties to be seized. Even senators learned to lower their voices. We had become a state where fear was a political instrument. Octavian stayed in Italy and learned to master the city's machinery. Votes, festivals, grain supply, and most important, legitimacy. Antony went east, where wealth is older and temptations are brighter. He settled in the lands around Greece and Asia, where harbors are deep and cities are full of statues that whisper, "We were civilized before Rome was a village." And then Cleopatra entered the story not as romance, but as strategy. Egypt is grain. Egypt is money. Egypt is ships. Whoever binds Egypt to his cause can feed armies and buy loyalty. If you want to understand how the coming war would be fought, look at a map of the Mediterranean and trace the coasts. Armies are heavy. Ships are faster. The east is a web of islands and narrow straits. Control the sea lanes, and you can choose where the land battle happens, or avoid a land battle entirely. I was sent as part of a senatorial delegation to inspect preparations at Byzantium and the naval yards along the Italian coast. This is where war becomes carpentry and accounting. Timber is felled in the Apennines, dragged to rivers, floated to shipyards. Pitch and resin are collected. Oars are carved. Rope is twisted from hemp. Sailcloth is woven. Thousands of hands build an instrument of policy. On the docks, you hear the language of sailors, practical, superstitious, full of jokes that cover fear. And you begin to understand that a navy is not a symbol. It is a supply chain made of wood and sweat. we crossed to Greece and staged near the Gulf of Ambracia, close to a headland called Actium. The landscape there is sharp and bright, low hills covered with scrub, salt marshes buzzing with insects, and water that can look calm while currents tug underneath. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet lay within the gulf, protected by the narrow mouth like a beast behind a gate. Octavian's forces, commanded by Agrippa at sea, held positions outside, aiming to choke that gate. Here's what the heroic versions skip. A fleet is not only ships, it is food, fresh water, and morale. Men living on cramped decks get sick. Oarsmen weaken if rations shrink. If the wind blows the wrong way for days, your whole plan stalls. Off Actium, both sides waited and suffered. Supply lines stretched back to Macedonian towns and Greek farms that were already tired of feeding Roman quarrels. Then, on the day of battle, the sea became a courtroom. Lines formed, signals raised, drums beat time for the oars. You would have seen how different the ships were. Antony's side had larger vessels, floating fortresses with high sides meant to ram and board. Octavian's side had lighter, faster ships, built for maneuver and repeated strikes. The water was crowded, and the sunlight flashed off bronze beaks on the prows. The fighting was chaos disciplined by training. Ships crashed and locked together, men threw grappling hooks. Archers and slingers sent clouds of missiles. Firepots arced through the air and burst into flame on wooden decks. Smoke blurred the horizon, and in the middle of that confusion, Cleopatra's squadron slipped away through an opening, sails catching wind. Antony followed. Whether it was a planned retreat or a panicked decision, the effect was the same. Their fleet's will broke. The battle became a killing ground of isolated ships and desperate men. After Actium, the war did not end instantly, but everyone understood its outcome. Egypt fell. Alexandria opened its gates. Antony and Cleopatra died, and with them died the last rival center of power, strong enough to challenge Italy and Rome directly. Octavian returned, but he returned carefully. That caution is the beginning of what we call the empire. You might expect the Senate to resist. Some tried. Most did not. We were tired, and we were also pragmatic. Octavian did not stride in wearing a crown. He offered restoration. He returned certain powers to the Senate and the people, and then accepted other powers for the public good. The language was conservative. The result was revolutionary. He kept the legions under his influence by controlling their pay and their veteran settlements. He arranged provinces so the richest and most militarized regions answered to him more than to competing senators. You would notice how peace changes the city's sound. Under war, Rome is a place of rumors and hurried footsteps. Under Augustus, because that is the name Octavian takes, Rome becomes a construction site. Stone replaces brick. Temples are repaired. Forums are expanded. New roads are laid out of the city like spokes. Aqueduct arches march across valleys carrying water to growing neighborhoods. The bureaucracy thickens. Censuses, tax, assessments, legal reforms. Peace is not idleness. It is organization at scale. And yet, I will not lie to you. The Senate's dignity became a kind of theater. We still debated, we still voted, we still flattered ourselves that tradition lived. But the decisive questions, where legions would go, who would govern certain provinces, how succession would work, rested in one household. The Republic had been a system where many ambitious men competed inside rules. The empire became a system where ambition survived by orbiting one center. Now, if you were beside me at the end of my life, I would take you to the same riverbank where I once watched barges heading to Ostia. I would point downriver and remind you that Rome still depends on grain ships and sea routes, on roads and contracts. I would point upriver to the hills and show you smoke rising from new neighborhoods, proof that the city is still growing. And I would tell you the final lesson I learned the hard way. Rome is not immortal because it is good. It is resilient because it adapts, even when adaptation costs people their freedom. If you came here hoping for a simple moral, I cannot give you one. I can only give you what I saw. Men who loved liberty and still used violence. Men who promised order and still broke lives. A city that called itself the world and, for a time, became exactly that. And if you listen closely, you might hear it even now. The sound of names in the forum, the echo under marble, the quiet breath before a vote that will change everything. Outro. If you stayed with me through all 4 chapters, thank you. If this kind of immersive documentary-style storytelling is what you want more of, please subscribe to the channel and like the video. Leave a comment with the era you want next. Another Roman story, a different empire, or a different battlefield. And I'll build the next journey with you.